I was standing there, suitcases in hand, ready to leave. My daughter, the one I had raised and cared for all these years, had just given me an ultimatum that shattered my heart. Serve my husband or leave. Her words rang in my ears, and I could hardly believe what I was hearing. It wasn't just a simple demand. It was a choice between family loyalty and everything I had worked for. I smiled, not because I found anything funny, but because there was nothing else to do. I knew deep down that my daughter had changed. She wasn't the girl I once knew. Her life had shifted, and somehow I wasn't part of her new world. As I packed my suitcase in silence, a part of me wanted to shout, to demand answers, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. I had to leave. I had to get away from the situation that was tearing my heart apart. I stepped out, shutting the door quietly behind me. As I walked down the hall, I felt the weight of everything I was leaving behind. 2 weeks passed before I heard from her. The phone rang. I looked at the screen, 48 missed calls. She wanted me to come back, but the damage was done. It wasn't just the words that hurt, it was the betrayal. What had led to this moment? Why had my daughter pushed me away? I knew I had to go back to the beginning and understand what had happened. It started a few months ago when my daughter got married. I was excited for her. She had found a man who seemed kind, respectful, and full of promise. I did everything I could to help with the wedding, making sure it was a day she would never forget. But after the wedding, things began to change. Slowly at first, but then it became impossible to ignore. Her husband, David, wasn't as perfect as I had believed. He was controlling, manipulative, and had a way of making me feel small. I tried to ignore it at first, thinking it was just the stress of being newlyweds. But as time went on, it became clear that he was making decisions for her, for both of them. And I was left out. At first, I told myself that it was just a phase. She was adjusting to married life, and maybe this was how things were meant to be. But when I would try to talk to her, I noticed that she would get defensive. She didn't want to hear what I had to say, and every time I voiced my concerns, I felt more and more like an outsider. But it wasn't until that fateful day when she called me into the living room and said those words, "Serve my husband," or I realized just how much she had changed. The girl I had raised, the girl who used to turn to me for advice, was now choosing her husband over her own mother. I couldn't bring myself to beg her. I couldn't force her to see what I saw, so I did what I thought was best for me. I left. I didn't know where to go. I couldn't stay with anyone. My friends, my family, no one seemed to understand what I was going through. I spent the first few days walking around the city, trying to clear my head. I checked into a small hotel, hoping that time and distance would give me the perspective I needed. But my thoughts were consumed with what had happened. Why had my daughter made me choose between her and her husband? Why had she allowed herself to be manipulated? I decided to take a step back and look at it from her perspective. She was young, and she had a life to build with her new husband. Maybe, I thought, she had just outgrown me, but that didn't explain the way she had treated me. I had been nothing but supportive, always putting her needs first. Then one day, I ran into an old friend, someone who had known both me and my daughter for years. I asked her what she thought of the situation, and she told me something that changed everything. "She's afraid of him," my friend said quietly. "She's afraid of what he'll do if she doesn't do what he says." Suddenly, everything clicked. The controlling behavior, the distance. David wasn't just her husband, he was her prison. I knew that I had to do something. I couldn't just walk away and let my daughter suffer. I started planning my next move, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. A week later, I received a letter. It was from my daughter, and for the first time since I had left, I felt a glimmer of hope. She said she missed me, and that things weren't as they seemed. She begged me to come back and promised that she would make things right with her husband. I hesitated. Could I really go back after everything that had happened? Could I forgive her or David for what they had done to me? In that moment, I realized that I couldn't just walk away. I loved my daughter too much. I had to face the truth. no matter how painful it was. I returned home, but the tension was thick. David was there, sitting on the couch, looking as smug as ever. My daughter stood behind him, her face a mixture of guilt and fear. I knew she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. And then, out of nowhere, David stood up and said, "I told you she'd come back. She's always going to choose me over you." His words stung, but I didn't react. I knew what I had to do now. I wasn't going to let him control me any longer, and I wasn't going to let him control my daughter either. In the end, I did something I never thought I would do. I confronted David. I told him that I would no longer be part of his game. I told him that if he ever treated my daughter like that again, I would make sure he faced the consequences. The truth was, my daughter needed to see that she had a choice. She could either keep living in fear, or she could stand up for herself. It wasn't easy, but slowly, my daughter started to change. She began to speak up more, to stand up for herself, and over time her marriage began to heal. As for me, I learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is walk away. But in doing so, I was able to teach my daughter that there is strength in silence, and that love doesn't mean tolerating betrayal. The phone call that had once been filled with missed calls and regret was now a chance for healing. The emotional journey had taught us both a lesson we would never forget. The story wasn't just about a mother and daughter. It was about reclaiming our voices, finding our strength, and learning that true love means standing up for what's right, even if it means taking a step back. And in the end, I knew that I had made the right choice.